Okay, guys, can we start the session? Am I audible to all of you? Can you just confirm me whether the voice is loud and clear? Yes. Okay. Okay. All right, guys. All right. So we will start the session. And today we will be discussing the next theory, that is class struggle, class and class struggle. Okay. So we already done with the first part, that is the historical materialism. We discussed about Marx's idea about society, Marx's idea about individual, and then we have discussed about mode of production. That means the theory of society or the theory of historical materialism. And we have seen how you gonna answer that question. Okay. So here in this session, what we will do is, if you remember, whenever we discussed about that theory of mode of production, I have discussed about there will be a revolt, right? When the revolt will be there, when the mature condition exists, there will be a revolt, right? So what is that mature condition, and when that mature condition will come into existence? What are the reasons for that? Okay, and how this process is going on? That means the process of class struggle. It is actually that revolt is actually class struggle. There are two class we have discussed, that upper class and lower class, right? Any mode of production, if you take ancient mode of production, masters and slaves; feudal mode of production, serfs and lords; capitalist mode of production, workers and capitalists, right? So if you take any mode of production, there are two classes, and there is a struggle between the two. Why? In the beginning itself, if you remember, we have discussed about their cooperation, which is antagonist cooperation. They are cooperating, but still the interest is contradictory. Correct. And that is one of the most important reason for class struggle. But beyond that, there are some other reasons as well. That is what we are actually going to look into. So in today's session, what we will do is we will try to understand what is class. So first we will have to define what is class, what is Marxian understanding of class, because that is very much required. You can use that understanding and the concept in the theory of stratification also, because this is what exactly you will be using in the theory of stratification. That is from the chapter 5, right? Stratification and mobility. There you have Marxian theory of stratification. What is theory of stratification? It is related to class, right? So here Marx is talking about class. So we will try to understand what is that understanding on class according to Marx. We will define it, and we will also define certain other criteria related to class which he have discussed. And then we will move forward and we will discuss about class struggle. And when we discuss about class struggle, we will divide into two parts. First, we will see the reasons for class struggle, which is very important. I'll discuss three important reasons. And then we will go for the mechanism of class struggle, or the process of class struggle. And the process of class struggle is what the most important part. Their interests are contradictory. Okay, so perceptions, obviously everything is coming out of interest, right? So their interests are contradictory. That's why we are talking about antagonist cooperation. So the capitalist and the worker, if you take, their interests are contradictory. The capitalists want to maximize the profit. So if he need to maximize the profit, what he need to do? He have to give less wages. So he is only interested in giving less wages to the worker, and he want the workers to work maximum time. So maximum working hours, and he don't want to give too much of facility to the workers. That means that is going to take a lot of cost from him. On the other hand, if you look from the perspective of or the interest of the workers, they want more salary or more wages, less working hours, right? And better working conditions and all these things. So the interests are contradictory. So that is what you mean by antagonist cooperation. Even though the interests are contradictory, they are cooperating. So that is why antagonist cooperation. Okay, and that is actually one of the most important reason for class struggle. Anytime there is a potential, there is a possibility of struggle, right? Already your interests are contradictory. So conflict is inherently there, and imminent conflict is evident over there. So only thing is that mature condition have to come. Okay, so there are some other reasons also that we need to discuss, and we will also discuss what is that mature conditions and everything. So this is what, guys, any one of you can quickly summarize what we have done last session. Is it possible? Can any one of you try that? Or shall we move forward with the session? If you want to, because we have taken a break yesterday, so that's the reason why. If any one of you can do it, it will be better. Who can do it, guys? Okay, Ganesh, you can try. Just 1 minute. I'll just unmute you. It has to be very precise and maximum 2-3 minutes. Okay, it should not be more than that. It should be very precise when you're going for it. It should be like, it should not be a repetition of whatever we have discussed in the class. It should be very precise and to the point. Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, according to Marx, historical materialism.
So the two broad classes are masters and slaves.
Masters and slaves. Which again times goes on.
So guys, and okay, see, it's pretty simple. We just have discussed about historical materialism, which we have divided into two parts. First is his idea or the conception about society. Okay, and then we have discussed about the second part, which is the evolutionary development or evolutionary model of society. So in the conception of society, that's the first session that we have done on Marx, and where we have discussed about the production process, FOP, ROP, and superstructure, economic infrastructure, and all those concepts we have discussed. And in the evolutionary model, we further divided into two, the existing societies and then the futuristic modes, right? So existing societies, we discussed four, that the primitive communism, ancient mode of production, feudal mode of production, and then capitalist mode of production. And he visualized the futuristic modes of production in terms of socialism and communist mode of production. So these are the six modes that we have discussed in the evolutionary development, out of which two were futuristic. So in the primitive communism, we have discussed everybody is equal and there is no concept of ownership, food is abundant in nature and everything. So that stage is what Marx considered as primitive communism. Over a period of time, population increases and competition will come. So obviously nature imposed restrictions, and because of limitations, some people who own some tools and techniques, when they develop, they control the surplus food, and others automatically start depending on them. And this resulted into development of two classes, one dependent on the other, the masters and slaves. That classification have come. The owners of the tools and techniques who control the surplus, they were the masters, and those who are dependent on the masters are the slaves. So two class, haves and have nots, have developed. This mode of production is what? Ancient mode of production. And then over a period of time, the exploitation of the slaves have increased. They are pressurized to produce more and more food. And by this time, settled agriculture also started emerging. Okay. And then when the mature condition exists, and what is that mature condition is what we will be discussing today in detail. When the mature condition exists, means exploitation have reached and some other opportunities have come, the slaves will revolt against the masters, and they captured everything, and they are capable of producing things by their own. They can they can do cultivation, and they can do everything, but still they are dependent on masters for land and protection. Okay, so this stage is what actually Marx termed as feudal mode of production, where two classes are feudal lords and serfs. Serfs produce everything their own, but they're dependent on the masters, the erstwhile masters, the lords, in terms of land and protection. So for that, they will have to pay some rent or some taxes. And over a period of time, the demand for rent keep on increasing. And that led to the exploitation. And by this time, the industrial setup was coming, right? So the factories have come. So when the mature condition exists and the exploitation reaches at its peak, they revolt, the serf revolt, and they move towards factories for work. Okay, so they're expecting that whenever they want, they can go for work and they can get the salary. If they don't want to work, they don't want to work. That was the expectation, but that never happened, right? If you need to survive, you have to work. It's not a matter of choice. And then in capitalism, the exploitation is maximum. When it will reach at its peak, the workers control everything and workers capture everything when the appropriate time comes. And that lead to socialism, socialist mode of production, which is a transitional phase, which will eventually end in communism. In communism, everybody will be equal. And then it's a stateless society, it's a classless society. But when we discuss about the criticism, we will discuss that it's a utopian concept, it will never come into existence. Okay, it is never possible. How can there be a stateless society? How can there be a classless society? The functionalist, if you see the stratification theories, they are talking about class as functional. It is created by society only. So there cannot be any society which is without class, without inequality. So this idea, whether it will come into existence or not, that we can see in the critical analysis part. But as of now, this is the theory that we have done. Okay. And finally, I've given you a statement. Communism, everyone are equal. Okay. So it's an egalitarian society. So that is what the statement that I've given you. In communism, what will happen towards the end? you see, it's like you are not deprived from appropriating the products of nature. You can get everything from the nature or society. You are not deprived from taking anything, but all what it does is you are not allowed, or you are deprived from subjugating the labor of others in terms of such appropriation. So you cannot use others' labor in terms of such appropriation. Okay, so that's what we have discussed, and it's a very simple theory, simple topic. So today we will actually talk about that process of class struggle. That's what we are actually going to focus on.
Sir, I have a doubt to clarify.
What?
Can I continue?
Yes.
There is a one point mentioned that continuous struggle between the man and the nature will finally end in communism. So I'm not understanding how that the struggle will end. I mean, can you give us an example?
No, see, struggle means it is about the development. The way you produce things will be restricted by nature. So every time there is a struggle between man and nature, and you try to overcome that struggle through continuous modifications in the way you produce things. That means in terms of forces of production and changing relations of production. And that will come to an end in communism. That's what.
So in communism, do we mean that we no more exploit nature?
No, it is not that we don't exploit nature. That is not talking about exploitation of nature. The struggle between nature is not about exploitation. It's about restrictions will be there, the advancements and the technologies will develop over a period of time. But the time when we reach to communism, we will be much more advanced. That's what Marx is talking about, and nothing can restrict you.
Okay, and the next fifth point says that the struggle between one's being and one's social being will also end in communism.
In communism, everybody will be equal, and everybody can contribute as per their own capacity, and everybody will be distributed as per their own needs. So there won't be any tag like you are a teacher, you are a doctor. Like you won't be taken as a social being. Everything will be being. Whatever you want, you can do. You can express your creativity. That we'll be discussing tomorrow in the theory of alienation in detail.
Okay, sir. Thanks.
Now, in primitive mode of production, there is no such exploitation. So there is no need of any revolt. Arya, I don't know why this someone cannot hear the class. Is there any problem with the voice for anyone else? Is the voice loud and clear? Anyone is facing the problem? Okay, even if someone is facing the problem, you cannot obviously hear that question, right? There is no point in asking that. But at least I can get confirmation from some. Okay, so guys, we will start with the session. So class and class struggle. So let's try to understand the structure. That way we are going to discuss is like this. First, we will see what is class. We will define class. And then some concepts related to this, like they will ask you this in 10 mark, that class, you might have seen these questions, class in itself and class for itself. Okay, and then there is another concept that is related to polarization, class polarization. This is also a very important concept that we need to discuss. So after we're done with this, what we will do is we will move towards the class struggle. Okay, so in class struggle, what we will do is we will discuss the reasons. Mainly I need to discuss 3 reasons for class struggle, and then we will discuss the process or the mechanism of class struggle. Okay, so this is how the lecture is structured. So what is class? Let's try to understand class. Marx is not giving a proper definition of class, but as per Marxian understanding, class is nothing but your position in the production process. So Marx trying to understand everything, and Marx trying to connect everything with what? Production process. So you have to see everything in the context of production. So your class is related to production process. So if your class is related to production process, where you stand in the production process, that's what your class is, right? So if you are at the top level, then you're upper class. If you're at the bottom level, you are a lower class. If you're a bourgeois or if you're a capitalist, you are upper class. If you're a worker, then you're a lower class. So what is class? It is nothing but your position in the production process. So it's a pretty simple definition only. And what Marx says is, just like you cannot choose who's to be your father, you have no choice with respect to class. When you are born in classes. So what is your class? Your father's class. Okay, so you don't have any choice with respect to the class. It is nothing but the position in the production process. You cannot choose your class, but you may be born as a poor person, but you can be a rich person. So by birth, it is actually fixed. But then there is obviously mobility. But even in that mobility also, there are hindrances. You born for a poor person, becoming rich is getting very difficult, right? That obvious difficulty and hindrances are there. But what Marx says is, when you are born in classes. Just give me 1 minute. Okay, so yeah, we'll continue the session. I don't know what happened in between. So we are talking about this class in itself. Okay, class in itself means it is based on an objective criteria. Now, what do you mean by objective criteria? It has to be like a definition, right? Some objective criteria should be there, means it should be defined precisely. That's what you mean by objective criteria. So class in itself means what is your position? That is what actually mean by class in itself. So what we defined as class and what we said there, exactly the same as what you need to discuss as class in itself. What is important for Marx is the next concept, that is class for itself. Now, this is something which you need to understand. It is a very subjective criteria. So subjective means here there is some element of consciousness. Okay, so now what do you mean by consciousness? See, it's like this only. You belong to a particular class, like you belong to worker. Now, over a period of time, you all aware that you are facing some problems. You are paid very less salary. You have been treated very, very badly. You have been given very poor working condition, and you need to work so much of hours. Okay, so these things are there, and when the workers are aware about this common problem, some kind of consciousness will develop among them. And what they do is they try to unite themselves to solve this problem. Then what will happen? This class in itself, it was simply class in itself, that they belong to a class, they belong to workers, will turn to become class for itself. That means they try to transform their life, they try to transform their conditions and the situation. So this class for itself is actually based on and a subjective criteria when the class develop consciousness. It could be belongingness. Okay, it could be they are getting aware of their problem and they're trying to resolve the problem. Even these unions and everything, right? Whether the doctors union or any associations or any unions are actually example for class for itself. So what is the difference between class in itself and class for itself? Class in itself is nothing but your class. That's it. Okay, but this class, when they develop some consciousness, when they're aware about their common problem, when they unite for themselves, that means when there is some consciousness about the problems, class 4 itself will come into existence. Okay, class 4 itself means they're trying to transform some of the problems because they are aware about their common problem. Now they are getting together. That's what class 4 itself, class in itself, will become class 4 itself when there is some element of consciousness. Okay, so this is what class in itself means. Class, that's it, class itself. Class in itself and class actually is the same. Okay, that's what I've told. So guys, class in itself is nothing but the class, like you belong to a particular class, workers. That's what you mean by class in itself. It is based on an objective criteria. How you define it is a position in the production process. Objective criteria means there should be a proper definition. It is an objective criteria, your position in the production process. But what will happen when you are aware about the common problem? There will be consciousness which will come among the masses. Then they will become class 4 itself. Now they will try to do something for the classes. That's why it become class 4 itself. Okay, so there will be a transformation from class in itself to class 4 itself when the appropriate condition comes. So what is class in itself? Which is based on an objective criteria. It is nothing but the definition of the class itself. It is nothing but the position in the production process. Like when I say worker, it is class in itself. When I say doctor, it is class in itself. When I say engineer, it is a class in itself. Okay, these are particular class. But when I say some workers association, workers union, what is that? It is class 4 itself. It develops some consciousness, okay, some belongingness. So the class in itself will become class 4 itself when there is some consciousness, when they're aware about their common problems, when they try to transform their situations, when they try to solve their issues. So class in itself, which is based on an objective criteria, class 4 itself is a subjective criteria. Now here, when Marx talking about class, Marx talking about only economic criteria, nothing else. here we are understanding in terms of what it is, a position in the production process, right? Production process means it is economic infrastructure. It is only economic criteria. There is no other conditions have been taken into consideration, because everything else will be decided by your class. Okay, so Marx only talking about position in the production process, everything related to production. So class, position in the production process. Class in itself will become class for itself when there is an element of consciousness. Class 4 itself is a subjective criteria. So there is an element of subjectivity which will come there. Okay, now that's about these concepts. Now what we need to do is we need to discuss about class polarization. I've told you there are broadly two classes, upper class and then lower class. These are the two broad class. Okay, now these, apart from this class, there may be some intermediate classes like this. I can show you like this. See, this is upper class. Upper class will be always very less, right? Lower class, very huge in number. And then there may be intermediate class. Marx have given references to like some petty bourgeois, lumpen proletariat, etc. Petty bourgeois means some small traders, small business people, etc. Lumpen proletariats like poorest of the poor. So he have given references to many classes in different books beyond upper class and lower class, but he did not give too much importance to them. What he says is there may be some intermediate classes, but over a period of time, what will happen is it will either go to this or come to this. Just give me 1 minute, guys. Okay, so what will happen? These intermediary classes, the middle class, the so-called middle class, will either go to this by becoming rich. Maybe the small traders, they become a huge big trader and they will go to a top, or they will lose or they will struggle in their business and they will come down to the lower status. This is what, according to Marx, will happen over a period of time. And this process is what he considered as polarization. Okay, so what is polarization? The intermediate classes will be polarized into either upper class or lower class. Now, this process is what you consider or call as bourgeoisization. Now, upper class means capitalist, right? We are talking in the context of capitalism, or this is bourgeois, right? Bourgeoisie. So this process is known as bourgeoisization. Okay, you are becoming bourgeois, and then this worker, this is lower class means worker or proletariat. So what is that process? This process is proletarianization. Okay, just don't mind the spelling, I'm not able to write it properly. So guys, now what is polarization? Polarization means Marx broadly talk about two classes, upper class and lower class. He also made references to other classes. That means there may be intermediate classes, but over a period of time, this intermediate classes will be polarized into either upper class or lower class through the process of bourgeoisization and proletarianization. I hope this is very clear. Okay, so polarization is a very important concept. And what could be the criticism? Now, just normally I used to discuss the criticism in the critical analysis part, but what could be the criticism here? You can always remember, this has never come true, right? Instead, this group have widened, right? Like Marx is talking about that group will not exist, they will polarize. But that's not the reality. What happened? It became like this. So this group have widened. What is this group? Middle class. Who's more strong now? Middle class is very strong in terms of numbers, in terms of other criteria as well. They decide everything now, right? Whether it is politics or bureaucrats, or everything belong to this group. So this group is getting widened. That is contrary to Marxian assumptions or expectation. So this is actually a criticism, and this is actually given by Weber. It is better to use Weber. Even Darren, many thinkers are talking about this. You can also write it as your own criticism. You just read and understood this, and you can simply write, even if you're not taking any names, still you can write, instead of this polarization, the middle class is getting wider, and you can draw this diamond shape instead of this triangle shape, or you can even show like this also, a hexagonal shape. Both are fine, right? Anyway, we just need to show that this gap is getting widened, that polarization have never come true. So we discussed about class. What is class? Class is the position in the production process. Class in itself, the same definition, which is based on an objective criteria. Class 4 itself, when the class develops some consciousness of belongingness. What is polarization? The intermediate classes will be polarized into either poles, upper class or lower class, through bourgeoisization or proletarianization. So these are the initial concepts that we need to discuss with respect to the class. Now let's look into the next part, that is class struggle. Okay, so when we see class struggle, first that what we need to see is the reasons for class struggle. Guys, when we discuss the reasons, there are three important reasons that we need to cover. The first one, obviously, the one that we have discussed, that's the most important reason, that is antagonist or antagonistic cooperation. What is this? The two classes which exist in any mode of production, whether ancient or feudal or capitalism, they are cooperating, you can see, but the interests are contradictory, and this is what antagonist cooperation. So there is an imminent conflict, imminent struggle, which is going to happen at any point of time. Only thing is that trigger, and that trigger comes, that is what we have discussed as the mature condition exists. Okay, that I'll discuss in the next step. So this is one of the most important reason for class struggle. Second reason for class struggle, I'll be discussing tomorrow, because that is altogether a separate theory, alienation. Now, what is alienation and what are the different type of alienation, the reasons and the solutions and everything? One complete session, 1.5 hours, we are going to do tomorrow. So don't worry, don't break your head on this. So these are the two important reasons. And the third reason, something which we discussed yesterday, I'll have to briefly develop on it. So that is what I'm going to do now. See, what I have told us, there will be continuous modifications in the forces of production. Yes or no? Continuous modification, what does that mean? The way you produce things will keep on changing. When I say continuous modification in forces of production, it means there will be continuous developments in the way you produce things. The way you produce things means the tools and techniques and the equipments that you use to produce things will keep on changing, keep on improving. It will reduce the work time and difficulty of human being. At the same time, it will increase the efficiency. That is what you mean by change in FOP. It is very much necessary and it will happen. This is what quantitative change, right? Within a mode of production, in terms of changes in FOP, forces of production, or quantitative changes will happen. Now, guys, what will happen if there is change in FOP? Last time also we discussed this. If there is change in FOP, the change in ROP is automatically going to happen. It is evident, it is for sure, right? So because of change in FOP, there will be change in ROP. Right now, what will happen? The new ROP and the new relation and the existing relation will come into a conflict. That is also one of the reasons. So I'll just explain this point with an example. Yeah, see, I've discussed the same example, right? There is a person A who have some land. Okay, now he used to depend on this person B. What forces of production he used? He used the bullock cart setup. No, let's say this is a land and he want to till the land. So for the farming, right? So he depend on this guy B, traditional setup, bullock cart setup he used, right? This is the relation. A and B was in terms. This is the relations which they had in this production process. Now, what happened? I'm talking about change in FOP. That means the tools and techniques will change, advancements in the way you produce things. So tractors have come. So what now going to happen is C have the tractor. Okay, so C come up with the tractor. That means the better setup, changed forces of production. So now if A think about B, he's going to be a fool, right? A cannot think about B now, because if you are using B, if you're still depending on B, you cannot be competitive in the market. But on the other hand, if you depend on C, you can do things faster, you can get it more efficiently, you can get it more cheaper as well. So slowly what A will do is A will cut this relation and A will move towards this relation. You guys got it? So why this happened? Because FOP have changed. The way you produce things have changed. So you have to shift to the better person. That means if you need to survive, that is a system. The survival of the fittest is what any time, any society, any mode of production is talking about, right? So you have to shift to this guy. So this relation has gone. So the new relation and the existing relation will come into a conflict because of this. So these are the three reasons. First, antagonist cooperation. Second, alienation. Third, there is a change in FOP, which is that has to happen, right? That is a quantitative change. Anytime it will happen, today and tomorrow, day after tomorrow. This is like evolutionary development. Because of change in FOP, there will be change in ROP. So what will happen? Existing relation and the new relation will come into a conflict. So these are the three important reasons for class struggle that you need to write in your answer. Now, guys, this is the most important part. Now, this you need to understand. Only the first process you need to understand, like how the struggle happened in the ancient mode of production. The same is you're gonna repeat in the other two as well, because there is no struggle in primitive, nothing in socialism and communism. So we just need to talk only about three stages: ancient, feudal, and capitalism. Once you understood ancient, then the repetition. Only thing is that you need to change the two class. The process remain the same. Okay, so primitive, there is no class struggle, right? Because there is no antagonist cooperation there, because everybody is equal. Nobody is the property of anyone. Nobody dependent on anyone. Nobody is controlling anyone. So there is no struggle. There is no contradictory interest. But when it comes to ancient mode of production, what are the two classes? Masters and slaves. Now what will happen is, let's say this is slaves, and then masters. Okay, so what I have told you, if you remember in the last session, is within this setup, some masters will go for settled agriculture. Now, they are the pioneers of new forces of production. See, you cannot completely depend on nature with the tools and techniques that you have. Over a period of time, some of them, not every one of them, some of them have realized that you have to go for producing things your own. You have to go for settled agriculture. You have to produce your own. That's when you can survive. So this is a emerging group. I'll just write it as emerging group, related to what? If you want, I can write that also. Related to settled agriculture. So there is a group which is coming out of masters who are the pioneers of new forces of production, which is related to settled agriculture. That's the emerging group. They are related to settled agriculture. So what they do is, this, now these people, they don't want now this setup to continue. So they will aid the process of struggle. So they will actually support the slaves to go for a revolt, because they need an entirely new setup, not this setup, not based on this master-slave relation, not based on this ownership relation. They want that new setup, okay, that the feudal mode of production. So actually this group is supporting the revolt. So when the mature condition exists, they revolt. The revolt will come and will enter into a new mode of production. That's the feudal mode of production. So in feudal mode of production, if you remember, I have told you the erstwhile masters become the lords. Now, why the erstwhile masters become the lords? Because it was their plan. They aided the revolt because they are expecting that this is going to happen. They are the emerging group related to settled agriculture. They wanted this to happen. Let them cultivate, but we have the land and we have the storage space and everything. We just need the rent. Okay, so this is what their concepts. So now the slaves eventually become what? The serfs. So now here, what happened here? They wanted to change their condition, but did it really happen? No, right? They just changed the mode of production. So from ancient mode of production, there was a shift to feudal mode of production. So the way you produce things have changed. The mode of production have changed. The society have changed. The organization of work changed. But did they change their condition? No, right? The slaves become serfs. That's it. They are now the serfs are getting exploited, but in a different way. Not in the same way before, but in a different way. But they are not able to change their situation. So this revolt, what Marx says is, it was based on false consciousness. Why false consciousness is because, now listen, I've told you there will be consciousness which will come among this particular group. They will become class 4 itself and they will go for revolt. So here what happened? Class 4 itself came, but that class 4 itself is not based on true consciousness. It is based on false consciousness according to Marx, because they are not able to change their situation. They are capable of changing the system. They're capable of changing the mode of production, but their situation remain the same. Slaves become the serfs. Erstwhile masters become the feudal lords. So this is based on false consciousness, as they are not able to change the situation. I hope this is clear. In the similar way, now in the next mode of production, what will happen? This is the serfs, and then what is this? This is the lords. Okay. Now here there will be some emerging class. Now guys, can you tell me this emerging class will be related to what? So here there will be a emerging class which is coming. Now lords, see, anytime from one section, some new section will come. They are the pioneers of new modes of production. And when the system changes, only they will survive, right? So here, within the lots, the pioneers of new modes of production, they will come. They are related to, I'll just write it as emerging class here, the new emerging class related to factory system. The new emerging class is related to the factory system. So these groups have set up factories now. And now, when you set up factories, what is your demand? You need free labor. You need worker. But from where you can get? You can get from this group. But are they free? No, they are completely tied on the lands in the feudal system. So you need to make them free from the land. That's your objective. So actually, this revolt is aided and supported by this group of the emerging class. Just like previously what I've discussed, the emerging class aid or support the revolt. Here also the new emerging class, which is related to the factory system, they support the revolt, they support the serfs, and they go for a revolt. So they are making a promise that you will be entering into a new system, which is based on wages, which is based on salary. Whenever you want, you can come for work. If you don't want to work, you can rest. So nobody is forcing you to work. Okay, so this was the promises and everything which has been made. And what finally happened? They will revolt when the mature condition exists. Now, what do you mean by mature condition, guys? Not only exploitation. Here, exploitation is there. In what terms? In terms of rent or taxes. It is getting increased. But at the same time, new setup, they are getting another opportunity. Just like exploitation is there, doesn't mean that you will see. If you want to leave your job, what you should get? First of all, you have to be you should be done with your job, right? You don't like that job anymore. That is there. Exploitation is there. Secondly, you should get another better opportunity. If not, you have to survive there itself. So here serve, they are already getting exploited, so that is one thing, and they are getting opportunity now. So that is when I said mature condition exists. They revolt, but what will happen? This erstwhile serfs, they are becoming the worker, because these people wanted them to be the worker, and they are becoming the capitalist, right? So they are becoming the capitalist because they are the owners of the factories and everything. So now comes two classes again. So what happened here? There was a revolt, there was development of consciousness, but is that true consciousness or false consciousness? For Marx, this is also false consciousness. Why it is false consciousness? Because you change the system. Even though you change the system, your situation remain the same or even getting worse, right? So ancient to feudal, when there is a change, slave to serf, it is bad anyway. From slave to serf, it is bad. You're paying more tax and everything. Now it is getting worse. So Marx is giving a statement. History repeats itself. First as tragedy, second as farce. So first what you see is a tragedy. Slaves to serf. Now farce, even worse than that. Serf to worker. So this also Marx consider as false consciousness. Okay, so there was an attempt to change the system. The system have changed, but their condition remained the same. So it is based on false consciousness. Eventually, what they're doing nothing for themselves. Eventually, they're satisfying the interest of this section, that is the emerging class, and they are getting the advantage. Now in this setup, when the capitalist worker rule is there, setup is there, when the exploitation reaches at its peak, the workers will unite with appropriate system of ideology, with proper leadership, with proper organization, with proper guidance and everything. And then there is no further scope. There is no further new mode of production or forces of production or anything which is coming out. So they will unite and they will try to transform their situation, and they will capture everything, and they will enter into a new mode of production after capturing everything. And there will be only one class, that is socialism. There will not be any class struggle, and that will eventually culminate into communism. So only thing that you need to focus on when I discuss about the process of class struggle is this emerging class. They are the actually villains here, right? So they motivate, they aid, they support the have-nots to go against this system so that they can change, and they will get the advantage. Okay, so this is what actually happening here. So I hope this is clear, guys. So what we did, we discussed about class. I'll quickly summarize it. Class is your position in the production process. And then we discussed about class in itself and class for itself. Class in itself is based on objective criteria. Class for itself is based on subjective criteria when a particular class develops some consciousness. Okay. And then class polarization, that intermediate classes will be polarized into upper class or lower class through the process of bourgeoisization or proletarianization. And then we just discussed about true consciousness and false consciousness. And then the reasons, what are the three reasons? Antagonist cooperation, one reason. And then alienation, the other reason. And the third one, again, which is very important, there is a change in FOP that lead to change in ROP, that lead to a conflict. The process is anyway simple, right? The emerging class, that's the main reason. So eventually, even though there is a revolt, you are not transforming your life. You're just changing the system for satisfying the emerging class. So eventually, you are satisfying the interest of few, that emerging class, and not your group. So the erstwhile slaves become serf, and erstwhile masters become lords. Erstwhile serf become workers, and the lords become capitalists, right? And this will, in these two cases, it is false consciousness, but later in capitalist system, according to Marx, it is based on true consciousness because you're able to change your situation. Okay, so let's go with the PDF now. Let's try to understand class first. Understanding of class occupies central place in Marx's systemic view of society. Man enters into relation with others for the satisfaction of needs through production. Not though, it is through production. Okay, it's by mistake. These relations place individuals in different positions, creating abstract strata-like formations, and these stratas are termed as classes. According to Marx, we are born in societies where these relations have already been determined. That means by birth, you're born in classes. He states, just as a man cannot choose who's to be his father, he have no choice with respect to his class. Marx frequently uses the term class, but he defines it scarcely. In his later works, particularly Das Kapital, he defines class as a group of people sharing the same position in the process of production. Okay, so those who are sharing